Hi, welcome back to this Kingmaker the Second Guide to Kingmaking. If you're following along, I've gone and set up the other three factions, De Vere, Beaufort and Talbot. You can see the map's looking a little more full now than it was when we left it in part one. Playing yellow is Talbot. So you can see I've set up, they've got the Earl of Shrewsbury, they've got Cromwell up here with the title Earl of Westmoreland, and Constable of Dover Castle is their office. Notice they've also got a noble Clifford who doesn't have a title, so he holds no office. But we have given him 30 Burgundian crossbowmen. Playing blue is Beaufort. We've got the Duke Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, and Hastings here. Hastings has been given the title Earl of Richmond and Chancellor of England. It has control of Norwich and Bishop of Norwich. This one's interesting because being given Bishop of Norwich, there's a little section here that says if Norwich is neutral, that's the city of Norwich, take the city of Norwich card and award it to the Bishop of Norwich. Okay, so the bishopric here comes with control of a city. So we go, there's Norwich, so an extra card. The same thing happened up here. Talbot's faction was awarded Le Michael, the ship of Bristol, and this one said if Bristol is neutral, take the city of Bristol. So they've got an extra 20 troops and control of the city of Bristol as well. There we go. You can set up, if you want to follow along, like I say, you can set up the same way here. And then finally, playing pink, De Vere's faction. De Vere is the Earl of Oxford with Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and 20 Scotch archers. Then we've got the noble Audley, granted Earl of Essex, Steward of the Royal Household, and their Bishop of Lincoln. Do you see this bishop doesn't award anything special? But there's a few things I wanted to point out. So, for example, Earl of Essex here awards control of Colchester. When we were setting up Oscar's faction, we saw a title Earl of Kent. There was no extra town being awarded here. And I might have mentioned that use the mini-map to find towns that you control. Well, Earl of Essex is a title that awards a town, Colchester, but there's no mini-map on here, all right? But there is a grid reference and there is a name. So look at the cards and be sensitive to the fact that not every controlled town has been pinpointed with a map. And I'm guessing this is a cosmetic issue because these title cards just kind of look nice with that coat of arms there. Okay, so just be aware, there's a few little exceptions and look out for them. There's a few other little things I want to point out. Each of these nobles has one home castle, but if we jump back up to Talbot's faction, Cromwell here has 2 home castles. Okay, so that means when you're doing setup, not only are you deciding where to allocate all your crown cards, you're also deciding for this noble where are they going to begin on the map. Are they going to begin in Tattersall or South Wingfield? And if you're following along, here they are. So they've both got Cromwell's shield on them. Okay, so you can choose to go here or to go here. Notice too that we've put these little control markers on the map. Now I've chosen where a home castle blocks a road, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, but where a home castle like Ashby here doesn't cross the road, right? The words do, but the shield itself, the royal castle itself, doesn't cross the road. So I've not bothered to put a control marker on there. But if you look here, it's Tick Hill. This is Audley's home castle. There's 2 roads running through this area where this castle is. Tick Hill only blocks this road, it doesn't block this road, and I've placed a control marker here to show that. If a fortification physically blocks a road on the map, like Blakemere here doesn't, South Wingfield here does, then that fortification may block that road and travel down that road. So here we've got the yellow Talbot's faction blocking this road because they control this fortification which is sitting on that road. Then other factions can use that road only with the yellow faction, Talbot's faction's permission. Okay, their own units can move up and down there. Their own nobles can move up and down this road. And that's really important. We're going to come to that very shortly. While we're on the subject, You'll notice too that what I've done, so this is Cromwell's home castle. This is where they've decided to place their noble. They might just as easily have placed it over here. That control marker still stays there, right? They control this fortification. They're controlling this road. It doesn't matter that their noble's not there. Okay, it's just the fact that they control this castle. Now, likewise, if we look over here at Tattershall, although I haven't placed Cromwell there, they do control this. Okay, they control it because they've got the card that says they control it. Why have I placed a control marker here? Because there's a port here. A port is either neutral or controlled, and it's controlled if there's a fortification in the same area. Okay, we don't place this shield on top of this or on top of Boston or anything else. If they're in the same area, then they control the ports. Okay, so Talbot's faction controls this castle, they control this port, so I've placed a little control marker there next to that port. Ships can come and go whether a port is controlled or not, but units on ships, that's a different matter. Okay, and we'll look at that again a little bit later. So there you go, these are the control markers. Towns that are controlled, so you'll notice the pink knot control marker here. We've got a home castle here for Audley. Here's Audley over here, controlled by this noble, but they also control Newark and Lincoln. Okay, Newark comes from that office. It just happens to be the steward of the royal household, awarded to Audley, the pink faction. And Lincoln here, because they are the Bishop of Lincoln, and again it awards control of the town of Lincoln. All right, so look out for that. Look out for all these little controls that come after setting up your nobles. Place these control markers on those towns and cities, royal castles, and castles if you want to. We could, if we want, place these control markers on the actual noble shield on the castle, but you don't always need to unless they are blocking roads or controlling ports. Okay, it depends how attentive players are to what's going on the map. So control markers are out here, noble pieces are all out here. We've chosen their starting positions. Notice too that I did actually do a little bit of a rejuggle. So if you're following along, the Chancery has now the Admiral of England and Earl of Wiltshire, right, office and title in there. Remember, we selected these randomly. I had to change them because the ones that I'd randomly placed there have actually ended up being part of these starting factions. Okay, you ready? All right. Now remember, Oscar, the Boar's Head faction, the brown Boar's Head faction, the game's calling them Pole's faction, so that's our fictional Oscar, is start player. Why are they start player? Because start player goes to whoever is holding the most senior archbishop or bishop card. It might have been nice to have it on the player aid, but it's not. So you do have to just jump back to the rule book to get this. Okay, play starts with whoever controls the most senior archbishop or bishop in this order, and you do have to look at it. It's the top of page 9 of the main rule book. Okay, so start with Canterbury, York, Durham, Carlisle, Lincoln, or Norwich in that order. So does anyone Archbishop of Canterbury? No. Bishop of York? No. Bishop of Durham? Yes. Yeah. Pole, Duke of Suffolk is Bishop of Durham. All right, so they get the start player. Now there is a little trick here. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, it's got the card number. Bishop of Durham is CO3. He's third in line, so he's the third highest ranked bishop. The Archbishop of Canterbury is CO1, and the Bishop of Norwich, ranked 6th, is CO6. So you can just look at that to say, right, who's got the bishop? What's your number? Whoever's got the lowest number is the highest ranked. Make sense? Nice little trick there. Now, if you're playing with the set factions, the player who's start player has got an asterisk here to show you there, so you don't have to go look it up, but there it is. So we're starting with the Boar's Head player. Now, what do they do on their turn? Look at the player aid. This is helpful. Sequence of play. Event phase. Okay, we draw a card from the event deck. Remember that event deck is ticking through towards being able to take a prestige victory. Movement phase. You move your nobles around, okay, and your ships. Okay, we've got 2 nobles, Pole and Berkeley. And one ship, the ship of Plymouth, right? Yeah, the Rose is down here. Okay, so movement phase, combat phase may happen. Okay, now note, in the first round of the game, you're not allowed to attack another faction's nobles. This does give everyone a chance, and this is something that's different in this version of the game, gives everyone a chance to just kind of reposition, juggle for position without fear of being attacked. Then we do Parliament phase, coronation phase, end of turn. Parliament phase is when we get to assign the stuff that's sitting in the Chancery. Okay, so that's what those cards are there for. But there's conditions attached to when Parliament phase can happen. Coronation phase is when we can crown a royal peace. Again, there's conditions attached. So Parliament and coronation phase are not going to happen every turn. Instead, every turn is going to be draw an event, move, combat if people have come into contact with each other. End of turn we grab new crown cards. Okay, so let's see it play out then. Incidentally, if you are following along the guide to Kingmaking, there are a few little printing errors on here and things aren't quite set up as they should be in some of the diagrams. All right, so I'm going to be following this but kind of adjusting for some of the little things that have gone on. I've used the fixed factions in a 4-player game, for example, and I mean they've got Rockingham Castle being occupied and that's not allocated at the start of the game, so that's not the case. And I think some of the imagery might be a little outdated. They've got a square royal piece. They don't look quite like that. So I guess this was from an older iteration. But there you go. It's still pretty good. It's still pretty good. It gives you, the text is telling you what you need and you can figure out what's what from the pictures. So it certainly is good enough. Let's kick off then. So first phase of the game, draw an event card. So every player's going to do this on their turn, right? So we're just going to take turns, starting with the start player. We'll go clockwise around the board. On your turn, draw a card, see what it is, and it is a Chancellor may summon Parliament card. Okay. Now it says here, when drawn, give to the faction with Chancellor of England. If not in play, discard it. Chancellor cards, these are slightly changed. I think they're much better in this reimagining of Kingmaker. I like the way they work. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it's all written here in text. So we just check. Does any faction control the Chancellor of England? They do. It's an office that's been assigned to Hastings, Earl of Richmond, which is within Beaufort's faction. So this card gets given to Beaufort's faction. If you remember from part 1, we seeded the event deck with Clamour for Parliament cards. The interesting thing is that normally if there's one king in play, which there is right now, Henry VI, there's only one king, the player whose faction controls that sole crowned royal peace may summon Parliament during the Parliament phase, but only if there's a Clamour for Parliament in play. But if there's no sole king, or if there's 2 controlled kings, so a Yorkist king and a Lancastrian king, then the Chancellor can summon Parliament, but they need one of these cards in order to do so. So this has equipped Beaufort now to call Parliament if they can control a king, make it 2 kings, or get rid of Henry VI somehow. And getting rid of royal pieces is actually really easy. If you control a royal piece, then you can eliminate them voluntarily from the game. So this is how you get down to having a single crowned king with no heirs. You eliminate all the other royal pieces by taking control of them and eliminate them. So there we go. We've completed our event phase. There's a whole bunch of different event cards that can come up. Let's have a quick look. There's Storms at Sea, which means any ships that are out sailing about need to head to the nearest port. Incidentally, these cards are split into 2, okay? We're looking at the top left corner, not the part in black. Here we have an embassy card. This time, if there's a sole king, they get called to Malden and their accompanying noble, okay, get called to a certain place. So the game is quite dynamic. You think that you've holed up and you've got you've captured the king and you've got your noble and defences all in a lovely location, and suddenly an embassy gets pulled, an embassy event that drags everyone off to a different location. We've got a peasant revolt. Again, this is calling nobles to different places and different offices to different places. Okay, so relocating some of your nobles. Here we have a plague. The plagues attack certain towns and cities. The good thing is they only happen once. So if you put one of your nobles and accompanying cards in a particular town, there is a chance that they get killed by the plague, unless the plague cards already come out. And this is a big part of the game, remembering which plague cards have come out, which towns are safe to use. It's really good fun, great fun. There's a free move card. Remember, everyone's got one of those right now. We can freely move one of our pieces, because all of our pieces can only move once per turn. Okay, again, raids. I think that's probably oh yeah, we got mercenaries go home. So this is where mercenaries that are boosting up your armies could suddenly disappear and abandon the noble they were supposedly loyal to. Okay, so different types of events are going to be reshaping things on the board. So next phase is we get to move our nobles and our ships. During the movement phase, you can move any or all of your nobles and ships. They can only be moved once each, unless you have a free move card. If you have a free move card, everyone starts with one, then you can do an additional movement. That additional movement with a free move is independent of your regular one move per noble, one move per ship. And that's important because there's three types of movement. There's regional movement, road movement, and sea movement. And each move you do can only be one of those. You can't combine them, all right? So you can't move a bit by road, a bit by sea, a bit by land, okay? So regional, road, sea. So Oscar, our Brown Boar's Head faction, Pole faction, has two nobles and one ship. Right, let's start with how do I move on land? How do our nobles move? So we've got Pole and Barclay. Let's sit as Barclay. Here's Pole. Let's look at regional movement first. And if you know classic Kingmaker, kind of forget it, because we're really learning the rules of movement right now. These spaces bounded by these white borders are called areas. Spaces bordered by purple boundaries are called regions. Pole is in this East Anglia region. Okay, see this region bounded by the purple line and the coast. When you decide to move a noble using regional movement, you can move to anywhere within its current area. So at the moment, he's inside the castle of Wingfield, but he could potentially move out into the field. We flip him over like this. Okay, so within the area, he's moved out of a fortification into the field of his area. If you're inside a fortification, then you benefit from the inherent garrison that's sitting there. And in the castle, there's a garrison of 100 units. You can check this little guide down the bottom here. So you can see there here, garrison of 100. All right, so when Pole is inside that castle, he's got an additional 100 units that come with the castle protecting him. So right now, he's got 100 troops plus 100 from the garrison. It also says here, protect plus 300. What that means is that castle has a capacity. It can only accommodate up to 300 units from the noble. If we were over and above that limit, we'd have to wait outside in the field. So if for some reason we had, I don't know, 350, 320, whatever, any more than 300, we would have to stand outside here. Right, so that's inside the area movement. The other thing we can do is we can move to any area inside the same region. So anywhere in the East Anglia region we can move to. But fortifications themselves are either neutral, like Ipswich and Lynn, they're not controlled by anyone, or they're enemy controlled, like Colchester and Norwich, they're controlled by an enemy faction. Neutral and enemy fortifications, we can't go in there. So if we move around this region and we decide to move to Lynn, we can't go in. Okay, we have to stay out in the field because it's neutral. Likewise for Norwich or Colchester, we can go up here, there's nothing to stop us moving to this area, but we can't go into the fortification. It's enemy controlled. Wingfield is friendly. It's controlled by us. It's controlled by Pole, Duke of Suffolk. So we can't go there. We can go in here. We can go into this fortification. So you can happily, freely move into friendly fortifications. You cannot move into neutral or enemy fortifications. However, you can form alliances. Remember, we set up our alliance pieces here. So let's say at some point in the game we form an alliance with the pink player, with De Vere's faction. Now, because we're allies, we can move to Colchester and go into the fortification, as long as there's capacity for us. Okay, so that's movement inside the region. Additionally, this is the final way you can move using regional movement. You can move to any adjacent means bordering our region, any adjacent region. So let's say I want to move to this region here. I can pick up my piece, I can move into this region, and I can occupy any area in this region. It's adjacent, any area will do. But again, same rules. Okay, you can go into a friendly fortification, an allied fortification, but not a neutral or enemy fortification. So if I wanted to go to Leicester, for example, I'd have to sit out here in the field. If for some reason I controlled Leicester and Rockingham, if I wanted to move my noble using regional movement, remember you can move anywhere inside the area. So I've got a choice now. I can go into the field, or I could move from Leicester into Rockingham Castle, okay, or from Rockingham Castle to Leicester, if they were friendly. Okay, so that's regional movement. Notice there's nothing blocking movement anywhere apart from going into an enemy or neutral fortification. That's regional movement. The second type of movement is road movement. If you're in an area that contains a piece of road, which we are, there's a little bit of road cutting through here, then you can jump onto that road, okay, we're no longer in the fortification, and move anywhere along it. But any fortifications on that road controlled by an enemy faction, by another player's faction, will block that movement, and I'll have to stop and move off the road into the field there unless I get the controlling faction's permission to move through. Okay, so once I'm on this piece of road here, I can move along it anyway. Okay, all the way down here if I wanted, all the way back up. Okay, and that's why you put these control markers on these castles and towns that are blocking roads, because then it's easy to see how far you can go. All right, this isn't blocked. London's a neutral. Neutral places do not block road movement. They did in previous iterations of Classic Kingmaker. They don't here. We can move, we can hop onto that road, we can move anywhere along it as far as we want, perhaps all the way to Shrewsbury. Now Shrewsbury is controlled by the blue player here, so we have to stop and move out into the field. Okay? We can't go beyond Shrewsbury, it's blocking the road. Do you see? I can say to that player, let me through, and they'll go, maybe, maybe not, let's make a bargain, let's make a pact, oh, okay, if you ally with me, that kind of thing. Notice too that castles like this one here, Stafford, they're not blocking the road. They actually have to be across, physically across the road. Okay, the lettering here doesn't block a road. Ashby here is not blocking a road. Blakemere here, not blocking a road. But this one here, South Wingfield, is blocking a road. And that's why you'd put these control markers on here too, next to nobles' castles when they are blocking a road. This one is, this one isn't. Okay. All right. So that's road movement. Notice the fortification doesn't have to be on the road, just the area has to have a road running through it. So from here I can go along that road, stop here, road, stop here, keep going if I want to, keep going, stop here, right, stop here, I can go into London. If I stop at London, remember this is a neutral, right, I can't go in there. But what I'm doing if I wanted to go here is obviously sitting outside London with my troops and besieging it. But besieged locations always block movement. So this, if London here is besieged now, we put one of these tokens on, that's now blocking movement through it. Whether it's neutral, whether it's controlled by an enemy and you get their permission, doesn't matter. Besieged locations always block the roads. There's a big old wall going on. You can't just push through and nobody notices you. Okay. Right, that's road movement. You can see if you can control roads, important points in roads, you can actually get around the whole of this map pretty quickly. So at the moment, how far north can I go by road? I can jump on the road here. So these road locations are really important. I can keep going, I keep going. I'm only blocked here at Newark. Incidentally, there's a special case here with Newark. Do you see how there's, normally if you move into a location that's blocked, you have to go and sit in the field. Well, for Newark, I can't actually get in because there's no gap. See the purple border and the actual castle here, there's no gap between them. So this Newark, and there's a special comment about this in the rulebook, if this is controlled by an enemy, it actually stops you going in there. You can't even get into the field, okay, because you actually have to pass through the fortification to get into that field, and that's a special situation. So you actually have to stop here at Grantham. These little towns, by the way, these are unfortified. They're just like little named locations, but they're not fortified. Okay, you don't go into Grantham and become fortified. They don't have a garrison. They don't provide any defences. They're just named locations, really, to name the different areas on the map. Right. The final type of movement is sea movement. Sea movement lets you move a ship, and a ship can move up to 5 spaces. These are sea spaces, up to 5 sea spaces. And moving out of a port counts as one of those 5. Moving into a port counts as one of those 5. So remember, we're playing Pole's faction. The Rose ship of Plymouth is ours. It's down here. So let's say we wanted to move the Rose of Plymouth. We kind of want to move it up and around, perhaps into a port. We've got our eyes focused over here, perhaps on Wales or the Midlands here somewhere. So let's say we want to move this up and around. Moving out of this port, it's in Plymouth currently. So whichever is the closest sea zone is where you're going out and into. Okay, so from Plymouth it would be to this sea zone here. From Dartmouth it would be into this sea zone here. Okay. From Exeter it would be into this sea zone here. Right, so that's one movement. Flip it because we're no longer in the port. That's 1, 2. This region here is a whole region. That's 2, 3, 4, and then 5 up in here. I might have done something like this instead. I might have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, and then into Swansea 5. You can stop enemy controlled ports, that's absolutely fine. Ship movement at sea is never blocked. Okay, nothing will block a ship. The sea is big enough. Note too, in some places there's like estuaries, like here you've got the Bristol Channel. This doesn't cost any extra or anything like that. This is part of this sea zone. Okay, so from here I can get into Cardiff, into Bristol. Okay, that's fine. No extra movement. Same for London over here. Okay, London is a port. But from this sea zone, I can go 1 movement into Rochester, or indeed 1 movement into London. Okay. In previous incarnations, this estuary counted as an extra sea movement. It doesn't in Kingmaker 2nd. Okay. Remember I told you too in part 1 that ships can carry units. So if we had a noble here, let's say Pole was here, as long as Pole hadn't moved yet on this turn, they could hop onto this ship. Free movement doesn't count, so I could have, if I was over here and wanted to get Pole to Plymouth, I could have used a free move to do kind of regional movement into this adjacent region, hopped into Plymouth. Then, using my regular movement, I can jump on the ship, as long as I've got capacity for all its troops, and then the ship can move with that unit. Okay. If we move into a friendly or unfortified port, like here at Milford Haven, then the units must disembark and enter the field there. All right, and that counts as having moved now. Right, it's done sea movement. It can't now do regional movement or road movement, unless you have a free move card, of course. However, if there were a neutral or enemy fortification at the port we're trying to disembark from, then they're considered to be siege attacking. They must have enough troops to initiate a siege. Right? If they don't have enough troops, so they wouldn't here for Swansea, then they have to stay out in the sea zone. Okay? They cannot land here and disembark. All right, that's sea movement. Let's put the ship of Plymouth. So we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's sticking back up here. So we've moved our ship. What about our two nobles? What do we want to do with them? Now remember, we're trying to get these royal pieces, and each of our nobles have got 100 troops each, but together they've got 200, and 200 is enough to besiege a town or royal castle. So if we can get our nobles together, and that's one of our objectives, especially during turn 1 when no one can attack anyone else, if we can get our nobles together and form a bigger stack, a stack of strength, then we can start besieging and grabbing royal pieces. All right, so how might we do that? So Berkeley's here, Pole is over here. We have a few options. We could concentrate near London. We can both get to London, so that would unite our nobles. We'd have 200 units outside London. The problem is, London is a city. Cities have a garrison of 300 protecting them, so that might be a little bit too much. No, we can get to London either through regional movement, because they're in adjacent regions, or indeed road movement, where both our nobles are sitting on roads, and nothing's blocking the roads to London. Okay, the only control markers are ours. So we could go for Henry VI, but we're not strong enough yet. We will get stronger because at the end of the term we're going to be pulling new crown cards, and that could be anything. It could be a new noble, it could be some mercenaries, it could be a town. And remember, in Kingmaker 2, towns bring troops. Another option would be to go for someone like George, Duke of Clarence. Duke of Clarence is sitting in Cardigan. Remember, Cardigan is an open town. That means anyone can walk in here. So everyone at the beginning of any game of Kingmaker is looking at George, Duke of Clarence, because they're just like a sitting duck there in Cardigan. Can we get to Cardigan? Not through regional movement, because that would be two regions away. Yeah. So we couldn't get there from Berkeley. Obviously, Pole is quite a way away. There's no road to Cardigan. But we do have a free move, so we could get there. We could actually get there. The road's going to take us just as far as Bristol, really. But we could use a regional movement to move into Wales, and then use a free move to head here. And this is an open town. Go in, take control of Clarence. So we could do it using our free move. But obviously that doesn't unite our nobles. We've only got a strength of 100, so we're sitting there a little bit vulnerable. The town itself has a garrison of 200, so actually it would be 300. So we'd have 300, but still vulnerable. 300 is still a little vulnerable. Not as good as a town with both our nobles. That would be 400. So what else might we do? And also it would use our free move card. Free move cards are valuable. I mean, we could potentially draw more during the event phase, but having a free move means we can kind of pull off little surprises and keep our opponents on their toes. So what about these royal pieces here? We can get to those. They're just one region away. In fact, these areas here that are sitting on the road all the way up to Shrewsbury, we can get as far as Shrewsbury, and then just via the road, then obviously we hit that blocker and we'll have to go out into the field. But any of these areas through here are reachable, and indeed we can get to Kenilworth just from a regional movement. Remember, we can move and then sit in the field outside Kenilworth. Now, Margaret of Anjou is sitting in this royal castle. Royal castles have a garrison of 200, so Berkeley on its own couldn't do anything with only 100, but can we unite our nobles together? They are 200. Well, again, we could use regional movement to get into this region, and then our free move to get into here, or indeed use road movement to get in here, and free movement then to move within the area to get to Margaret of Anjou. But Coventry is sitting here in this area on this road. I mean, Berkeley can get into this using regional movement or the road, and indeed Pole can get there using the road. So that seems like a winning option. We could, let's do that again. We could move down the road, stop at Coventry, and place our noble out in the field. Berkeley could do regional movement, so move to an adjacent region, any area in this region, and stack with pole outside Coventry, and we could both sit here now, and we could either besiege Hastings sitting in their castle, or Coventry and its garrison of 200. A castle, so a noble's castle has a garrison of 100. Okay, not as good as a town, but obviously Hastings is there with all their units. And what do they have? They don't have those 30. They've got, Norwich doesn't bring any, 50, 90, they've got 100. So they've got 200 sitting there. This noble in Ashby, or Edward of Westminster in Coventry. Well, this is obviously a much better target because it's got a royal peace. But not just that, royal pieces don't fight back. Enemy nobles do, and we'll look at that a little bit later. Remember also, it's the first round of the game, and you're not allowed to attack another faction's nobles in the first round of the game. So we couldn't attack Hastings there in Ashby, not now anyway, but we could sit outside. But Edward of Westminster sitting in Coventry is fair game. So that seems like a nice move there for Oscar and his faction. Notice that these two nobles are now stacked. Okay, that means they're standing together, uniting their forces. I mean, the rules of movement are still the same as if they were moving independently, but to save time, you can move them as a stack. But no rules change really. It just means that when defending or attacking, they're attacking and defending as a unit. They're combining their troops in a stack here. So that's now an army of 200. Now at this point, we've kind of kept our options open. We're standing in this field. Hastings here, the Beaumont faction, may be a little worried. They might be looking at this thinking, hang on, are they looking at me or are they looking at the town of Coventry? We don't have to decide yet, okay? We don't have to decide until we get to the next phase of the game, which is combat.